there is one question that very few men ask themselves before making this decision. The question is not, should I stop talking to her? The real question is, what exactly happens inside her when my voice disappears from her life forever? Most men assume that silence goes unnoticed, that she simply moves on without friction, without weight, without consequences. They are wrong. Permanent silence is not an absence. It is a different kind of presence. And when a man maintains that silence with genuine conviction, it sets off a chain of emotional reactions that she cannot control or ignore. Today, I will reveal the 5 emotions a woman experiences when you decide that your voice no longer belongs in her life. If you are committed to your silence when the situation demands it, write in the comments, "My silence is final." First, confusion in the face of something irreversible. Human beings are conditioned to recognize gradual changes. Someone replies less often, slowly pulls away, or begins speaking with a colder tone. The mind can process those changes, categorize them, and eventually accept them over time. But when the silence is absolute and comes without warning, the brain cannot find a category for it. At first, she interprets it as a temporary pause. She assumes you're busy, that it's only temporary, that a message will come tomorrow. But tomorrow comes, and no message arrives. Then another week passes, and still nothing. What first seemed like a pause begins to take the shape of something far more permanent. That is when true confusion begins, not a superficial doubt, but the kind of confusion that slowly eats away at the mind. Did I do something? When exactly did everything fall apart? Is there any chance this isn't permanent? Marcus Aurelius wrote that we should accept whatever happens as necessary, but she will resist that acceptance with all her strength, because accepting that your silence is permanent means closing a door that part of her still wants to leave slightly open. That resistance traps her in an endless loop of unanswered questions. Permanence without explanation is one of the hardest things for the human mind to process, not because it is cruel, but because it offers nothing to hold on to. There is no conversation to analyze until the very end. No argument that explains the ending, only silence that continues to grow until it settles as something final. Second, the pain of losing something she never truly appreciated while she had it. When your voice was part of her daily life, she did not consciously see it as a privilege. It was simply part of the background, your tone, your words, your unique way of speaking. It was always there, and because of that, it never demanded special attention. Epictetus expressed it perfectly. It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. She assumed your voice would always be available. When it disappears, the pain is no longer abstract. It becomes concrete and deeply personal. It appears in specific moments, when something happens and her first instinct is to tell you, only to realize she can't, when she needs the perspective that only you used to offer and it no longer exists, when she remembers the way you used to say her name and realizes she will never hear it again. This is not merely romantic nostalgia, it is the loss of a unique form of connection. Your voice had become a channel she used without even thinking about it. When that channel closes forever, she feels the emptiness every time she instinctively tries to reach for it. It is in the comparison between what once existed and the silence that now remains that she experiences the full weight of what she has lost. And perhaps the most unsettling part is that she never felt the value of that weight while she still had it. It only becomes clear after it is too late to do anything about it. Third, a rejection more absolute than any other. There are many ways to distance yourself from someone replying later, being less present, investing less emotionally. All of those communicate disinterest gradually, and gradual change, however painful, still leaves room for adaptation. But never speaking to her again is not gradual. It is a line. On one side there is communication, on the other, complete and permanent silence. That kind of break feels like the most absolute rejection possible, because verbal communication is the most fundamental way we acknowledge another person's existence. When you speak to someone, even if it is only to argue, you are still recognizing them as someone whose presence deserves a response. When you decide that there is nothing left to say to her, you communicate something that no words could ever express with the same force. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and within that silence, her imagination will work relentlessly, creating explanations for such absolute rejection. She will search within herself for a reason that explains why she is no longer worthy of even your words. She will build narratives about her own worth or lack of it in an attempt to make sense of something that, from the outside, has no visible explanation. Every time she sees your name and remembers that she will never hear from you again, that feeling of rejection is renewed. It does not fade easily because it has no blurred edges. It is clear. It is final. And that clarity is precisely what makes it so difficult to ignore. If this content is giving you a new perspective, support us with a like. It means a great deal. Fourth, the helplessness of not being able to get even a single word from you. There is something deeply rooted in human nature. When a door is closed to us, our first instinct is not to walk away, it is to try opening it. And when the silence is absolute, that instinct becomes even stronger. She will try to break it, not necessarily in obvious ways, but she will try. Perhaps a casual message that appears innocent, a situation carefully designed to provoke a response, maybe even something more direct. But if your decision is genuine, every one of those attempts will meet the same wall. Nothing. That complete absence of reaction creates something even more corrosive than rejection itself. Helplessness. The feeling that there is no action she can take to change reality, that there is no key to that door, that her ability to influence you has permanently fallen to zero. Marcus Aurelius wrote that we have power over our own minds, not over external events. But that wisdom is easy to read and extraordinarily difficult to live when the external event is the silence of someone whose voice still matters to you. She will confront that limit again and again. She will try. She will fail. She will try again. And every silence she receives in return will reinforce the realization that she is completely outside your verbal world with no leverage, no opening, and no path back. What makes this helplessness so unique is its precision. It is not simply that she cannot contact you in general, it is that she cannot obtain a single word, not one sentence, not even one syllable. It is that precise, deliberate silence that makes it so difficult for her to endure. And every failed attempt does not lessen the helplessness, it deepens it. Because every unanswered attempt becomes fresh confirmation that your decision has no cracks. Fifth, the moment she realizes that your silence said everything. There is a paradox about permanent silence. It communicates more clearly than most words ever could. At some point, she will understand that. If you tell someone that you no longer wish to speak to them, at least there is communication. There are words. There is an explicit message, something to process and eventually bring to a close. But when you simply disappear from her verbal life without saying anything at all, the silence itself becomes the message. And that message is more powerful than anything you could have spoken. Your silence tells her that she is so completely outside your life that there is nothing left to be said, that you feel no need to explain, no need for closure, no need for a final conversation. It tells her that your voice has value, that not everyone has the right to receive it, and that she is no longer among those who do. Epictetus said, "First, decide who you want to be, then act consistently with that decision." Permanent silence is exactly that. It is not an emotional reaction. It is not punishment intended to hurt someone. It is a definition of character. It is the clearest expression that you know what deserves your attention and what does not. And that boundary is one you draw yourself, without negotiation, without explanation, and without compromise. Eventually, she will reach that realization. She will understand that your silence was never empty, it was eloquent. It communicated the most absolute form of closure without requiring a single word. And when that understanding finally arrives, it will be even harder to bear than all the previous questions combined. Because questions at least leave room for hope. Recognition does not. She will realize that your voice disappeared from her life, not by accident, not because of circumstances, but because of a deliberate, conscious, and final decision. These 5 emotions are not merely theory. They represent the sequence that someone may experience when a man chooses permanent silence and maintains it without hesitation. Confusion in the face of the irreversible. Pain over something she never appreciated while she had it. Rejection in its most absolute form. Helplessness with no way to change the outcome. And finally, the realization that your silence spoke louder than 1,000 words. The Stoics did not view silence as weakness or cruelty. They understood it as a form of clarity. Not every situation deserves your words. Not every person has earned your voice. And when communication has become toxic, repetitive, or simply unnecessary, permanent silence is not avoidance, it can be the most honest and dignified response you choose. Your voice carries weight. It has value. It is not an unlimited resource that anyone can claim. And when you choose to withdraw it permanently, you are not punishing anyone. You are simply remaining faithful to who you are and to what you decide deserves your time and energy. If you are committed to that principle, if you understand that your silence can be your most powerful statement, write in the comments, "My silence is final." If this content gave you a meaningful perspective, leave a like, subscribe and turn on notifications, because here we don't teach reactions, we teach decisions.